Welcome to another episode of the Revenue Lounge. I'm your host, Randy Likas, and joining me today is Tim Seamans, VP of AI Transformation at Mimecast. Tim has been leading one of the most ambitious and forward-thinking enterprise AI programs for all departments across Mimecast. Today, he will discuss his team's progress and success specifically for go-to-market AI applications. I'm thrilled to have him share his journey and experience with us today. We'll explore how Mimecast built their AI acceleration function, the barriers and breakthroughs along the way, and what it takes to drive adoption across every level of the organization, from the board to the front lines. Tim will also share candid perspectives on measuring AI impact, balancing innovation with governance, and how he sees agentic AI in the future of go-to-market. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Tim, maybe you just give us a little bit of background in terms of your career journey and then leading up to your current role at Mimecast.
Absolutely. So I spent the greater part of the last 15 years working in technology and being focused in data and advanced analytics. And I've worked for a number of primarily software companies, but took my foray into cybersecurity about 10 years ago, where software and data and AI all meet, right? The foundation of cybersecurity is AI. And I've spent those 15 years just developing solutions that drive smarter decisions with data. And at Mimecast, we're a global cybersecurity company that helps companies understand human risk through our AI-powered platform. And we protect different organizations through email cyber threats, business email compromise, any type of targeted attack. And I feel very fortunate to really be focused at this nexus of software meets cybersecurity meets AI. And it's been really a great transition to go from data and analytics and data structuring, traditional data science, now into the vast landscape of AI.
I saw that you've been in your current role as VP of AI Transformation for just under a year now. We've been at Mimecast for, about 4.5 years. How did this AI acceleration program or function come to be? How was it born? And maybe walk us through that journey.
Yeah, I find myself very lucky, first and foremost, to be doing what I'm doing. It's a mixture of both good timing. It was a little bit of both necessity and opportunity. So we already had a really strong foundation here at Mimecast in data and analytics. And when generative AI hit the scene and ChatGPT became ubiquitous for everybody, we as a company realized we're going to need a much more defined, faster, deliberate focus on AI, both to transform how we work and what we do, but also to accelerate those business outcomes that we were always driving. So it was really a no-brainer, I think, for our executive team to go and create this new team. We do still consider ourselves a fledgling new team, given that there isn't a lot of history out there in AI and AI transformation, AI adoption, AI acceleration. But for us, it went from something that we might do if you have the right technical expertise to something that we have to do. It's not just an experiment. We're really driving our business using AI.
And it's such a new function, or many companies are starting to establish the capabilities. And when I talk to different folks, it lives in different parts of the organization. And at Mimecast, although we're going to be talking a lot about the go-to-market applications that you've built, but I do understand that you've built AI capabilities for every function across Mimecast, right?
Right.
I'm just curious in terms of where you sit. Are you part of the IT organization? Or are you a separate function? What's that org model look like?
Yeah, and this has been the case in data and analytics throughout my career, right? I've rolled up to operating functions, sales functions, finance functions, and actually not been part of a broader IT organization. Today, we're under the chief digital officer, who also heads up our IT organization. So I guess you can say we're loosely connected there. But I think what's great is that we have top-down buy-in through our executive team, our CEO, our board. And really, that is one of the biggest and most important pieces if you really want to drive this. And for us, we had to define what the job was. So before I even took the role, I had to define, here's what I'm going to do. If you want me to do this and I want to do this, here's what I'm going to do. Are we all on the same page? And we got there.
And so if you think about your charter, like when you defined that, what is the charter in the context of Mimecast's overall business strategy?
Yeah. So for us, we are focused on several things. We are, number one, focused on how can we use AI and embed it in everything that we do. That's the productivity and efficiency lever, right? So that is number one. I think number two is talking about our AI governance and strategy. How does it filter into our product development, again, in the ways we work, but also in how we service and support our customers and prospects and partners. And third and foremost, as you said before, are focused in also building proprietary AI and AI systems. And I think that is an important challenge, which is if we're all using the same technology and adopting, that is going to be a competitive advantage for a certain amount of time, a short amount of time. But essentially, every tool, every software that you buy for business productivity is going to have generative AI built in. It's going to have AI capabilities built in. It's just a matter of time and function. And I think for us, we noticed very early on that one of the biggest challenges is going to be in data, right? And how do we get the right data in the right place at the right time to drive the right outcome? And so we have a mixture of solutions that we've built for proprietary advantage and solutions that we've bought, right, to help support and service our teams.
So, Tim, when you think specifically around the go-to-market applications that you've built for either marketing or sales or customer success, what are the metrics that you're building for, or the different KPIs that you're focused on improving through the different AI programs or applications that you've built?
Yeah, I think so. Metrics and like the number one thing is outcomes, right? So we are focused very, very heavily on our business outcomes. In a software company, that's everything from driving new customers and customer acquisition. It is expansionary tendencies, right? How can we drive more into the same basic customers to give them more value and more protection? And then it's the how can we keep our customers longer? How can we prevent them from going on and finding value elsewhere? And those are three of the biggest, I'd say, revenue and top line measures that we look at. But we also look at productivity gains, right? And for a lot of people, that can be everything from hours and hours saved. It's a little bit squishy if we think about it, right? That's the type of thing where people don't like talking about, well, you saved me X amount of hours. They then go and say, well, what did I get, right? So if I saved you that hours, where did that go? And what was the outcome that it drove? And I think at the end of the day, we turn that back into dollars and cents as well, just to be like, hey, this is efficiency gain over time. And we really measure that impact obsessively, I think. But make no mistake about it, it is very difficult to measure these things, particularly around direct adoption, direct impact on some of these. Some we set up for success in part of our proprietary build. So we make a pointed effort with our business leaders to make sure that process will meet execution. So if we build XYZ thing, let's say it's expansion. We have an expansion model that looks at customers, their propensity to expand, what they might be best positioned to buy, what are the drivers, the signals. And we use a mixture of machine learning as well as generative AI to bring that to life for people to then have those conversations with customers. And if we set all that up and then we have no idea whether people are using it, whether it's driving outcomes, and that the recommendations essentially that are being made aren't actually being actioned, or it's kind of squishy, people say, I don't know, maybe it's just I have really good salespeople. And so we've set it up so that the process and the leadership buy-in is paramount to then measure that. So we have a lot of leading and lagging indicators that help us understand our impact.
Do you have any examples, either cross retention or expansion, that you can share with us in terms of some of those specific outcomes, either in maybe revenue saved or expansion pipeline identified, that you'd be willing to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep on the expansion side. I think we had a lot of disparate processes, a lot of disparate systems that people are using, and it's really difficult to consolidate systems, right? In your classic CRM landscape, ERP landscape, whatever the case may be. And you're not necessarily going to be replace everything and centralize, right? That's the old like Microsoft model, was get them all on the platform and give them everything, right? Classically. And I think what we took as an approach was how can we make your lives easier and bring all of the things together that you do based on outcomes. And we saw that in the first 80 days of impact, we drove $2 million of expansion directly, right? So that was direct attribution, let alone upwards of $30+ million in pipeline, just by bringing that all together with signals, with the right opportunities. Now, it was also the right confluence of time for Mimecast because we had just acquired a couple of new companies and capabilities that we sell around insider risk and governance and compliance. So we did have that tailwind to help, but it was really great to see all of the positive efficiency gain as well as targeted impact. And we paired it with our generative AI solutions that we use internally. So we have an all-purpose, similar to ChatGPT, generative AI solution that we've gone and trained and enabled and actually got more than 60% of our workforce certified as generative AI experts. And we paired a lot of that kind of machine learning with that type of how can I use it to message and discuss and objection handle with my customers, which helped to drive that impact.
That is incredible. One of the best examples I've heard in terms of outcomes and impact.
Thank you.
One of the questions that came to my mind is how do you work with your internal stakeholders to get alignment around what you're building, right? So you've got a lot of internal partners, I'm sure, that you work with. You need to have buy-in along the way. How do you work with them to identify and prioritize the projects that ultimately you end up building and delivering?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's not the easiest thing in the world, but it's also can be made a lot easier when you just talk about goals, right? And you say, hey, what do you need? What are you trying to do? And if we use a classic seller, they're like, hey, well, I'm trying to make money for the company. I am trying to make my quota, for example. And if you make it about the goals, it takes the technology out of the picture, right? To say, hey, how do I align to your business outcome to make sure that I'm delivering on it? And then you start hearing a lot of the pain points, right? So once you understand the goals, you've got your KPI. Then once you understand the pain points, you can say, well, all right, what's the best way to get at this? Is this a build versus buy conversation? Is this something where I'm going to build this technology and it's going to replace all of these various pain points and make it easier? And it's also really important not to try to, as we say, eat the elephant all at once, right? Like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And so it's really about like small pilots and proving that value quickly. We do a lot of iterative like development and then scale that business trust and momentum with champions. And really the other important part is where people make it their own, right? And one of the things that we found was really successful was driving essentially agent assistance with all of our employees where they could go and develop and design their own agents on for things that are repetitive tasks or things that problems that they wanted to solve. So we helped give them a little bit of the technology. We helped train them and certify them on how to use the technology, and it's taken off like wildfire.
Wow. And at the change management, I'm sure you're underselling it a little bit. I'm sure it was very difficult to do, but I love the approach in terms of what are the goals, what can we make things easier. Absolutely brilliant. I'm sure as you start talking to your business partners, there's probably some common misconceptions about what AI can and cannot do. What were some of those maybe misconceptions that you ran into, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. I think the biggest misconception or misnomer that we see out there in the news is that AI is going to replace me, right? And we like to talk about this like AI is not going to replace people, at least not necessarily right away and directly. But what will happen in the very short term is that people using AI will replace your relevance, right? So it's the old get on the bus adage, right? But the problem is that bus is already going 60 miles an hour down the highway. And you need to get on that bus while it's moving or be left behind. And I think that's number one on a misconception for me. And I try to dispel that a lot, which is like, you may be scared. Again, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt around AI, rightfully so, by the way. But I think what's important is educating yourself on what it is, what it isn't, where it can be helpful. And I think the other important misconception is that AI is not just one tool, right? It is a ecosystem of data and models and governance and approaches. And sometimes people will overestimate what AI can do right now, or they'll be stuck in the past. A great example is that when we look at the length of tasks that generative AI models can perform, they actually are doubling every 7 months. And so what that means is before I could go and write a simple email. But now that they actually can take on more and more task-oriented things, people are still thinking about, well, it helps me write my email, right? But it actually can do so much more in terms of being an agentic assistant or even that agentic AI approach that our mindset needs to shift away from that. Well, it just does this one thing over here and it spell checks for me, right? Or it helps me be better at communicating because that's a skill that I lack, right? And I think the important part is that people are going to shift into owning and manning AI agents over time.
Is there a limit of AI agents that you want your team to build, or do you think of the use case, go build the agent that you think could be helpful for you? Is there a scale issue where diminishing returns, and if so,
Yeah.
how do you manage that?
Yeah, and I think we have to start first by defining agents, right? I think there's many definitions out there. The agents that we currently use internally are more like assistants that are taking on repetitive action, but they're not the type of assistants that are actually completing the action, which is really where I think every business is going to or needs to get to, Mimecast included. And in the revenue landscape, like these agents that we have today, what we have to manage is like overlap, correct design, hallucination, all of the pieces that are the bad that go along with large language models and using generative AI without a healthy dose of skepticism, right? Like you have to come in as someone who can challenge the outcome that a large language model is giving you, right? And I think if you're not doing that, if you're not coming in and thinking through a lens of, I'll say, constructive criticism, it's not going to necessarily work for you. So we do a lot on the governance front to make sure that people aren't building the same thing. And truthfully, we haven't avoided it, but we've been able to connect dots, right? But at the same time, we don't want to slow our people down. And so in these early assistants, which I call like the 1.5 to 2x, productivity improvers, that's where you take something that is repetitive. And I'll use an example that's pretty like contained, which is every company probably has a T&E policy, right? That policy changes over time, but you also have a team who answers questions about a T&E policy, right? And they get these questions and they're probably all contained within this policy. And yet at the same time, that is time and effort that doesn't need to be done by a human. And so if you take that thing and you're able to structure it in a way where you create the instructions for your agent and you build that in and give that chat interface back to someone who can then use it, you've now given that team of individuals that have to answer those questions repetitively over and over and over again with new employees that come in, et cetera, with the tried and true, here's the actual context that we've given you. And if you engineer it the right way, you get the right answer every time, right? And if it doesn't know the answer, it puts it back into your process where you triage it didn't have the right answer here. So maybe I go update my policy so I have it. So now all I have to do is maintain this policy in this environment, but I don't have to do the question and answer stuff. And so I think that's where we are, at least today. I think the agentic future, though, is how do you create an ecosystem of agents that work for you that do a thing, right? To go and say, I'll use that example. I'm not saying that companies would adopt it widespread, but if it didn't have the answer, go figure out what a plausible answer based on our policy could be, propose it back to me as the person who manages the policy, and don't update the policy until I say, yes, I will accept that change, right? Like a pull request or a merge request in a software design. I think when we think about building and launching new products, for example, at Mimecast, we should be able in time to do that in 2 weeks. Why? Well, that's a lot of work. It's product market fit, it's design elements, it's UI, it's architecture, it's coding, it's marketing, it's sales. All of those pieces over time can have an agentic approach to it. And it becomes that coworker that helps drive those business outcomes we talked about: retention, expansion, new business growth, et cetera.
Yeah. So success breeds success, right? As you build some of these things and you've shown how much pipeline you'll be able to build or how much revenue you'll be able to save, I'm sure there's a huge pent up demand for people that want to do things. And you touched on this a little bit around the governance side. What are some of the biggest technical governance or even data related blockers that you've had to overcome over the course of the past year?
Yeah, it's interesting because like every organization, some of the biggest blockers is data availability, data silos, right? And we've had to put in processes to standardize the data, create data where it didn't exist, make sure that we had the right security controls in place. And luckily, we had a really good foundation here at Mimecast that we built over a number of years. And it was really around balancing that innovation without creating risk for Mimecast or any of our customers, et cetera. So that was kind of the biggest technological barrier. But in truth, with generative AI particularly, the technical barriers tend to go, you used to have this very specialized group of people in data science who could do outcome-based oriented things like machine learning. And now with generative AI, it opens that world up to, I'm not suggesting that we don't need data scientists, but it opens up that world to be less of a technology barrier and more of a time, effort, and where do I focus to get what outcome I'm trying to drive. And that's where the change management that you mentioned before comes in, because that is actually one of the biggest drivers. If you can get through the technological barrier and the data availability, which, by the way, like that is still a challenge for a lot of companies, Mimecast included, right? There's data that we would love to have that we just don't have yet, but we're continuing to fill those holes where we can.
What would be some examples? So the sales and marketing tech stack is so fragmented and so siloed, right? There is data that you probably have, you just can't get access to it, right? So I'm just curious, what is some examples of some of the data that you would love to have that you just can't figure out how to get to it yet?
Yeah, I think like any company, so Mimecast has been around for over 20 years, and throughout that 20 years, we've made lots of different acquisitions and a lot of development on our platform. And so one of the biggest things that I would love to have even more granular data is just in terms of product, right? Understanding the aggregate trends of different features and combinations in our product so that we can then do things like proactively recommend configurations or help share proactively within our product. Hey, customers like you also like to do this, right? Those types of actions, I think, because we built our own generative AI engine internally to understand our customer and prospect insights, what's really paramount there is gathering all that data together, and we use it in our data store, but sometimes it doesn't exist, right? So we have to pull it out of various systems, and we've used tools like Nectar to go and pull data from various places back into Salesforce, for example, which is our CRM. And it makes contact information and buying committees and the emails that might go back and forth from our employees with our prospects or customers more accessible. And I think that is some of the ways that we've solved the problem, but there's still pieces that are out there that, whether they sit in our MarTech stack or in our sales stack, and we continue to introduce even more capabilities day after day after day. And it's that old question of like, well, do you integrate it? Do you store it somewhere? And that's the journey that we're on.
Yeah. This is becoming less of a hurdle now, but than it was maybe even 6 months or a year ago. But oftentimes when we would get to a contractual level with a company, their compliance team, the risk team got really nervous around security of the data and things like that. Now, you guys are an email security company. You guys take security extremely, very important. Was that one of the considerations other than maybe competitive advantage of building your own systems? Or can you talk a little bit about where you guys were a year ago with security concerns and how you've been able to coach the team on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's no surprise that our security and governance is paramount, right? If we didn't focus there, well, frankly, probably would be out of business. So I think it's a really important piece to how we think about how we make purchasing decisions, particularly with vendors, but it's also about how we think about, we offer the same service to our customers in terms of that level of security and governance. So what we try to do is with pilots, we make sure that we hit minimum viable criteria on security and governance, but we move fast. And our goal to move fast there is to understand, like, does this start to meet a need, right? And can we see this scale over time, right? Those are some of the success criteria that we look for. And it's also about bringing in those partners in procurement, security, legal, so that they have not only a seat at the table, but are able to weigh in and be like, this is what we're concerned about, this is what you need to think about, this is what we think about. And so then we're balancing that innovation with their confidence and buy-in from the start, right? And not as an afterthought. And so I think the one thing that we're still focused on is how do we make this better and faster with pilots, right? We're continually trying to make that even faster so we can fail fast, as they say.
Yeah. One question I failed to ask you at the beginning was your team, right? So I know you've got a group on your team. How big is your team, and do they specialize in certain areas? Are they more generalists? Walk us through maybe a little bit about the composition of your team and how you structured it.
Yeah, we're actually a very small team for an AI transformation team. We have three main kind of capability areas and one kind of shared service that we work as a group on. And in the team, we've got a head of engineering and architecture who leads up a lot of our build versus buy decisions, who looks at how do we structure our data and our models for scale. We've got a data science team. So that team is two individuals. We've got a data science team that is four individuals that is focused on building those proprietary data models, really your classic machine learning and generative AI experts. And then we've got program management capability that kind of oversees all of the pieces that we're building, buying, and partnering on, because there's a big piece of the job that is how do we partner with organizations to drive AI scale through, again, some of those buy solutions. And then lastly is AI Fluency. That is a capability that we share across our enablement teams, our learning and development teams, that we as a transformation team lead the strategy and execution effort. But when it comes to executing in the wild, we have fantastic partners in these teams that help drive it both throughout the company and within their specific teams. And that's how we've gotten to close to 95% of Mimecasters are using generative AI in their day-to-day. We have every department at Mimecast using generative AI, which in the latest McKinsey study I saw, I think that was like, call it 20 to 30%. So on average of kind of technology organizations, I'm sure it's higher now, right? That study ended maybe 6 to 12 months ago, and this stuff moves so fast. But then the certification piece has really been helpful for us.
You've had the benefit now almost a year under your belt. You've had the team established. What advice might you give others who are maybe just starting to think about building out a team, or maybe asked a different way, what were some of your lessons learned along the way that if you could do them differently with the benefit of hindsight that you might do?
Yeah. I think number one, and I will just reiterate it, it's start with business problems, not technology, right? If you start with technology and try to implement it, you are going to likely have a longer road, right? And we don't want to, as they say, boil the ocean, right? So it's take a business problem or a series of business problems and say, hey, which one am I going to do first, right? And take that thin slice and work on that and show that value,
Yeah.
right? To get to that quick win, build your credibility, build that scale. Also, don't hesitate to build that strategy up front to say, well, in a perfect world, this is what I would do, but what do I have? What do I have resources for now? And then the last piece, and this has been the piece that maybe I even underestimated, was the cultural side, right? The AI fluency, being able to tell stories about how AI can help, working through change management is just as important as the technology, understanding the data science, understanding large language models, if not more so, right? Because without that culture change and change management, you're not going to move the needle.
So you mentioned the AI fluency a few different times. What does that look like internally? How did you go about building that AI fluency across the organization? Was it part of the enablement function? Because I think that's probably paramount to getting adoption, right? Is
Right.
the fluency of that. So how did you guys go about building that capability?
Well, like I mentioned, it was part of the strategic vision that I put forth at the beginning, which is like, hey, we're not going to do this well if we didn't have this pillar around AI fluency. The how we were going to get there, that was the secret sauce, right? So, working with the team and working with some of those partners I mentioned on learning and development and enablement and our business transformation office, we came up with like a three-tiered system to start. And we said, hey, there's going to be like a level one, level two, level three, essentially. And your level one is for everybody, right? How do you get people comfortable with AI? What is it? How does it work? And that's the foundational piece. And the unexpected piece was actually the level of certification. I actually didn't expect that we were going to be able to drive that much true certification, right? Where people are out there getting certified and using generative AI. The best part about it, it adapts to your job, your role, your function. So it very much personalizes. It uses generative AI, surprise, to then adapt to your role. And that has been part of what makes it so accessible because people are like, well, wait a second. Oh, I see how this works. Wait, it can help me. And it starts putting it immediately in their context. So I think that was foundational number one. Level two is really those data explorers, those people who want to build their own. And level three is your classic data scientists. And we still haven't actually rolled out anything for that level yet because we're still in levels one and two. But the last piece was that, so we started by bringing in an external speaker and having them talk about AI fluency, what it means, and really how it's like. And we had a speaker who was actually a cyborg anthropologist. And it was really awesome to have him come through because for cyborgs, it was how do machines and humans work together, right? So it was really all about that paradigm. That was MJ Petroni, who was a fantastic speaker and world renowned. And that helped set the stage for the year. And then after that, we instituted a global program where every person who comes through Mimecast and has induction has a dedicated AI induction at Mimecast. Induction being that kind of initial training you get as you start with the company. And so we knew that to head everything off, you had your existing 2,500 Mimecasters. And as we continue to add more, we wanted to make sure that they start that foundation running. And so we've been able to hit every single Mimecaster. We have a certification class that is 15 minutes. It's not long at all, just around do you understand what's available? There's the governance and compliance piece that I mentioned that's so important. That's built into it to say, like, you have to understand the rules of the road, the policies, what you can and can't do. And as a cybersecurity company, too, one of the benefits is we drink our own champagne, as they say. And so in terms of insider risk and data loss prevention and things like that, that is a big concern for the use of AI and certainly large language models. And so we monitor unapproved AI use as a company so that we can help redirect people to approved uses, right? And also to give us an understanding of like, well, okay, if this is being used, what are we missing a capability, right? That helps us develop the like, oh, we need to go build this, we need to go buy this to make sure that this capability, because our business stakeholders are demanding it.
Yeah. I want to be cognizant of time, but I do have a couple of really important questions I want to ask before we kind of transition to our lightning round, which is a little bit more fun and personal.
Yeah.
It, you've made such great strides, right? And the results have been, as you mentioned earlier, just been outstanding. What gets you excited? What's next? Where do you think the future is? And part two of that question would be if time, money, and resources weren't an issue for you, what would you tackle next?
Yeah. I think what excites me is continuing making that measurable impact, right? And Do I wish that it was easier to measure the actual impact of AI? Absolutely, right? Unfortunately, there's still a lot of time spent doing that to go and say, are we truly impacting X, Y, and Z? I'm a numbers and data and logical person, so I want to make sure that I'm verifiable, so to speak. But if the thing that excites me the most, it's also like the thing that I would immediately invest in if I had no constraints, unlimited budget, limited time, is I build in a fully agentic layer across the entire company. Like think of these as like true AI coworkers that can collaborate with employees in every function, right? And combining that predictive AI layer with generative AI, and think about customers who interact with us and need technical support. Do I need a human in that loop to answer it? Do I have this generative AI coworker that can help give you that initial guidance to see if you can go through and answer your question? But every internal process would have this kind of capability that would just drive so much more productivity. It would leave the like truly difficult things for our human coworkers to solve and manage. So that to me is both the future and what I would be doing if I could.
Is the technology there to be able to do that if you have the money and the resources?
Yeah, I do believe it is. I think, is it going to get better over time? Yeah, absolutely. I think you've got a lot of platforms out there where you can put this out there for people to build on their own, right? Much like we've done with our smart AI assistants through using generative AI. But the true challenge then becomes in that integration layer, the security layers through an agentic action, which, unless you're using one tool for all your things, can be a little bit more difficult, right? Every tool, like I mentioned before, is going to want you to use their tool and to do a thing, to build a thing, to be the platform of record. And I think that's going to be the next navigation too. It started out with large language, like, hey, which is the best model? And it's still there from time to time. Like, oh, I used Grok yesterday and I loved it. Oh, I used Gemini and that's like the best thing, the bee's knees. And oh, Anthropic, I use Anthropic every day. And that was the lexicon. And I think what's happening over time is they're reaching that asymptotic like norm where, yes, there's certain things that different models do better. It's very hard for the average user to understand which one to use when, but over time, that's going to become less of a challenge, and it's really going to be this, how do I use it to grow and demonstrate outsized results?
Yeah. So, Tim, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about when it comes to building these go-to-market applications that I should have, or anything that you want to share that we haven't covered yet?
Yeah, I think the only thing that we haven't talked about is really around like cost savings, right? That's another important piece that people really spend a lot of time thinking about and using AI to be like, well, it's going to save me all this money, right? If I'm a CFO, that's probably what I'm thinking, right? But I think what's really important is to know that the cost savings will come, but not to go and say, I invest this, so this goes away. And I think it's going to be a continuum over time where that the cost savings gets absorbed and put somewhere else, maybe actually into your AI programming. And I think you are doing yourself a disservice if you focus on the cost savings up front and say, I cut this cost, now go replace it with AI. It's going to be a hard hill for companies. So doing it with like dedicated transitional motion is really going to be important.
So I don't want to put words in your mouth. I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. So are you suggesting focus on the productivity gains first? That's probably the easier ROI that you can show. And then while cost savings are certainly important, that's secondary to the productivity gains. Would that be an accurate summarization?
I think that's part of it. I think additionally, like focus on your business levers, right? And costs obviously is a business, it's an expense, right? It's an expense line. But if you focus on your top line, you will also get that expense line to come down with AI.
Yeah. How much of the conversations that you're having today around what you're building and the different priorities is your CFO or finance team involved? Are they involved at the beginning, or do you bring them in once you've scoped out the project?
They are involved at every point in the project. I mean, again, as the stewards of our financial success, I think it's really important we keep them regular meetings to make sure that they understand what's coming. But also, like, again, you set budgets. Every company tends to set budgets on some cycle, be it quarterly, be it semi-annually, be it annually. And so your investments have to fit into that. And AI changes so quickly that if we wait for another annual cycle, you end up being behind, right? So it's really this important kind of give and take and education, right? That's the other thing. It's hard because this is all new, right? And there's not a lot of history for people to go and lean back on to say, and so you have to educate them to be like, hey, here's how this works in a way that you can understand. Here's what you can expect. But then also, again, it comes back to measurement, right? They're going to want to be able to say, show me the impact, right? And the other important thing for leaders in this line of work is to go and say, hey, that impact's not going to be tomorrow, right? If we're talking about customer retention as an example, that is a lagging indicator. So if you expect us to build a model that predicts where customers are having issues and then retain them tomorrow, that's not going to happen. However long it takes you to understand the risk, to do some kind of mitigation activity, to then improve the outcome for that customer is when you'll start seeing the results.
Yeah. Okay, so let's transition over to the lightning round.
Love it.
So you very knowledgeable and certainly walk the walk, as they say. I'm curious, where do you turn to for ideas and inspiration around AI? Do you have a network of people that you've worked with, or do you belong to communities?
Yeah, look, for inspiration, I get it from so many different places. And whether it's AI specific, it's things like podcasts. I listen to All In and Pivot, Lex Friedman. I listen to leadership experts like Simon Sinek, just in terms of like ways to think and lead and act. TED Talks, those are all the places. And then, of course, the local experts, right? It is a small world. I live in Boston. So in the Boston community, the folks working in this line of work in data, analytics, AI, we tend to know each other, right? And so bouncing ideas. And I'd be remiss to say we have a fantastic investor portfolio in Primera who owns Mimecast today, and they have a wealth of expertise across multiple portfolio companies that they are more than willing to share with us and be sounding boards and help support us. So all of that is really like what drives our inspiration.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of your job?
Favorite part of my job, seeing the light bulb go off in someone's head when they realize that AI can actually make their job easier. Like that
Yeah.
they can see the direct impact and then start using it.
Yeah. What about the flip side of that question? There's always going to be a least favorite part, or I often ask the question a little bit different, which is what's really hard about leading AI transformation?
I think the hardest for me is watching people just stick to the old way of out of habit of what they are doing and not being willing to lean in or ostensibly saying that they're done with learning, right? Because that's where it's like your kids. If you see your kids are going to touch a hot stove and you're like, please don't touch that. And they're like, no, I'm going to go touch it. That's the hard part. It's like, you got to let them go do it and come around eventually.
Yeah, 100%. What about your free time? So when you're not focused on building AI apps internally, what do you like to do on your free time?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm a dad. I have two kids, so I coach them both in soccer. I play soccer myself in an old man soccer league. My son is a scout, so I volunteer for that. And where we can, we squeeze in hiking with the family. I love to do DIY projects. And so I definitely have my work cut out for me on the weekends.
Yeah, for sure. You and me both. Okay, so last question, Tim. I'm sure as people listen to this, they're probably going to want to reach out to you. Where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Tim Seamans. I'm there most days and happy to connect and share resources and share secrets and obviously within limits. And really appreciate you having me on here, Randy. It's really been a pleasure chatting with you and talking about how AI can impact revenue teams and really appreciate the partnership.
Absolutely, Tim. Thank you for joining. It's been to not only work with you individually, but also partner with you to see what you guys are doing at Mimecast and the impact that you're making. I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your expertise with our audience.
Of course. My pleasure.
All right, Tim. Well, I'll be out in Boston in a couple of weeks. So let's get together while I'm there.
All right. We'll see you. Thanks so much, Randy.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Bye.